Picture this. You're walking through a used bookstore, and you come across a novel with worn edges, dog-eared pages, and notes scribbled in the margins. Someone has clearly lived with this book, wrestled with it, marked it up with their thoughts and emotions. Now imagine that book finding its way to a new reader. Someone who will benefit from all those previous struggles, all those penciled insights, all that emotional archaeology left behind by hands that came before. This is the story of human hearts after love ends. This is the story of how we unknowingly become sculptors of souls we'll never hold again. The garden we never see bloom. There's a Japanese concept called forest bathing. The idea that simply being among trees, breathing in their essence, somehow heals us in ways we don't immediately understand. The trees don't try to heal us. They simply exist, doing their tree-like work of growing, changing, adapting to storms and seasons. Yet something profound happens in that exchange. Love, I believe, works similarly. When we love someone deeply, when we share our days and nights and dreams with them, we're engaged in a form of mutual forest bathing. We're absorbing each other's essence, learning each other's rhythms, and something is always being transformed, even when we can't see it happening. But here's the cruel irony that keeps so many of us awake at 3 a.m. The transformation we help create in our partners often becomes visible only after we're gone. We plant seeds in soil we'll never see bloom. Think about the last relationship that mattered to you, really mattered. Remember those fights that felt like they were going in circles? The conversations that ended with both of you exhausted and frustrated, feeling like you were speaking different languages? Those moments when you thought, why can't they just see what I'm trying to tell them? What if I told you that those very moments, those seemingly futile, heartbreaking exchanges, were actually the most important work you'd ever do together? The forge of intimacy. Imagine a blacksmith's workshop. The metal doesn't want to be shaped. It resists the hammer, refuses the heat, fights against becoming something more refined than it was. But the blacksmith persists, not out of cruelty but out of vision. They can see the blade hidden within the raw material. This is what happens in intimate relationships. We become blacksmiths for each other's souls, though neither of us signed up for the job, and neither of us really knows what we're doing. Your ex-partner, the one who couldn't seem to set boundaries with their overbearing mother. They didn't wake up one morning and suddenly develop emotional backbone. It happened through all those uncomfortable conversations you had, through your gentle and not so gentle observations, through the way you modeled what healthy boundaries looked like, even when they couldn't see it at the time. The person who always needed to be right, who couldn't apologize without adding a but. They didn't learn humility from a self-help book. They learned it from watching your face crumble when they dismissed your feelings. They learned it from the weight of silence after their pride pushed love away one too many times. We are all walking around with invisible tools, unconsciously shaping the people we love most. The tragedy is that we rarely get to see the finished sculpture. The laboratory of love. I once knew a woman named Sarah who spent 3 years with a man named David. David had this habit of disappearing emotionally whenever conflict arose. Not physically leaving, but becoming a statue, unreachable behind walls of silence. Sarah, being someone who believed in working through problems, would follow him into that silence, trying to coax him back to the conversation, to the relationship, to her. Their fights followed the same script every time. Sarah would express a concern. David would shut down. Sarah would pursue. David would withdraw further. Eventually, exhaustion would set in, and they'd return to normalcy without resolution, carrying the weight of unfinished emotional business. This dance went on for years. Sarah felt like she was failing as a partner. David felt perpetually misunderstood and criticized. Both believed they were incompatible in some fundamental way. The relationship ended, as relationships sometimes do, with both people exhausted and convinced they were simply wrong for each other. 2 years later, I ran into Sarah at a coffee shop. She looked lighter somehow, though there was still sadness in her eyes when she mentioned David. "I heard he's with someone new," she said, stirring her latte thoughtfully. "A friend of a friend saw them at dinner last week. She said they looked really comfortable together. Like they'd been together for years, you know, the way they communicated." Sarah paused, and I could see something working behind her eyes. Not jealousy exactly, but a kind of bewildered recognition. The strangest part is, she said David was so emotionally present, like really engaged in their conversation about some difficult family stuff she's dealing with. Just there for her in a way that she didn't finish the sentence, but I understood. David had learned to show up emotionally. He'd learned to stay present during difficult conversations. He'd learned not to disappear behind walls of silence. But he'd learned it through 3 years of Sarah refusing to let him hide. Through her persistence, her faith that he could be reached, her willingness to keep showing up even when he couldn't. Sarah had been David's emotional education, and she'd never see him graduate. The paradox of imperfect teachers. Here's what makes this so beautifully tragic. We're terrible teachers for the people we love most. When you love someone deeply, the stakes feel impossibly high. Every conversation about their flaws feels like it could be the one that breaks everything. So we approach these delicate surgeries with shaking hands and racing hearts. We're trying to perform heart surgery while our own heart is breaking with love and fear. We choose the worst possible moments, when we're both tired or stressed or running late. We use the wrong tone, the wrong words. We forget that change requires safety, and criticism from someone whose opinion matters most feels like an existential threat. "You always do this," we say, when what we mean is, "I love you so much that when you hurt yourself by doing this thing, I hurt too." "Everyone else has noticed this about you," we say, when what we mean is, "I see your potential so clearly that watching you limit yourself is unbearable." We're like art critics who love the artist so much that our reviews come out as desperate pleas rather than helpful guidance. We're surgeons whose hands shake because we care too much about the patient. And on the receiving end, we're even worse students than we are teachers. When someone we love points out our flaws, our deepest insecurities get activated. The person whose opinion matters most is telling us we're not enough as we are. So we defend, deflect, attack back, or shut down entirely. We can't hear the love underneath the criticism because the criticism is coming from love, and that makes it feel like our very worthiness of love is being questioned. "Love me as I am," we cry, as if love and growth were mutually exclusive. As if truly loving someone meant being blind to their potential for becoming more than they currently are. The alchemy of absence. But something magical happens in the space after love ends. Something that almost makes the heartbreak worth it. When the relationship ends, when the immediate sting of criticism is gone, when there's no longer someone standing in front of us waiting for us to change. That's when the real learning begins. It's like how you can't taste food when your mouth is on fire, but hours later when the burn has cooled, you can finally appreciate the complexity of flavors that were always there. In the silence of our empty apartments, in the space where their voice used to be, we finally have room to hear the echoes of what they were trying to tell us. Without the pressure of immediate response, without our defenses activated, we can finally consider, maybe there was something to what they said about my relationship with my family. Maybe I do have a tendency to prioritize work over connection. Maybe I am afraid of vulnerability in ways that hurt the people who love me. Pride, that fierce guardian of our egos, finally relaxes its watch. We can admit truths to ourselves that we couldn't bear to acknowledge when someone else was waiting for us to change. This is the alchemy of heartbreak. The base metal of our stubborn resistance gets transformed into the gold of self-awareness, but only through the heat of loss. The ghost teacher. I think about David sometimes, in his new relationship, naturally creating the emotional presence that Sarah spent 3 years trying to teach him. I imagine him listening patiently as his new partner shares something difficult, staying present instead of disappearing, and I wonder if he ever thinks about where he learned to do that. Probably not consciously. Growth rarely announces itself. We don't usually wake up one morning and think, today I shall implement the emotional lessons my ex-girlfriend taught me through years of frustration and tears. Instead, it's more subtle. We find ourselves responding differently to conflict. We catch ourselves before we shut down, or before we say something cruel, or before we prioritize our pride over connection. We've internalized lessons we didn't even know we were learning from teachers we didn't recognize. Sarah becomes a ghost in David's new relationship, invisible, unnamed, but profoundly present in every moment he chooses vulnerability over withdrawal. She's there in his ability to apologize without defensiveness, in his willingness to have difficult conversations, in his capacity to be emotionally generous even when it's uncomfortable. She'll never get credit for this transformation. His new partner will think this emotional maturity is simply who David is. Lucky her, finding someone so naturally evolved. The years of Sarah's patient insistence that David could be reached, her refusal to accept his emotional unavailability, her modeling of what healthy communication looks like, all of this becomes invisible infrastructure in David's new love. The Academy of Broken Hearts. We're all graduates of this invisible academy, though we rarely recognize our education until years later. My friend Marcus spent 4 years with a woman who couldn't make decisions about restaurants, about career moves, about what movie to watch on Friday night. He found himself becoming the constant decision maker, the one who took charge, who moved things forward when she froze in indecision. It frustrated him endlessly. He felt like he was dating a child sometimes, like he had to be the adult in every situation. When they broke up, Marcus swore he'd never again date someone who couldn't take initiative, who couldn't step up and make choices. But something interesting happened in the months that followed. Living alone, Marcus started noticing his own relationship to decision-making. Without someone else's indecision to react against, he realized how quickly he moved through choices, how rarely he sat with uncertainty, how uncomfortable he was with not knowing. His ex-girlfriend's indecision had been her way of being careful, of considering all options, of not wanting to make the wrong choice. His impatience with her process had taught him something about slowing down, about the value of deliberation, about the difference between decisive action and impulsive reaction. When Marcus eventually met someone new, he found himself naturally creating more space for collaborative decision-making. He'd learned to pause, to ask, "What do you think?" and actually wait for the answer. He'd learned that his way of moving quickly through choices wasn't always better. It was just different. His indecisive ex-girlfriend had unknowingly taught him patience, consideration, and the art of shared leadership. She'd never know that her greatest gift to him was showing him his own impulse to control through quick decisions. The mirror we never see. Here's what's remarkable. While we're unconsciously teaching our partners how to love their next person better, they're doing the same for us. That partner who was always late? They taught you something about flexibility, about not being so rigidly attached to schedules that you miss the spontaneous beauty of life. The one who was too emotional? They showed you that feelings aren't the enemy of logic, they're information, and learning to navigate big emotions is a skill that will serve you in every future relationship. The one who was too guarded? They taught you patience, how to create safety for someone who's been hurt before, how to love without demanding immediate reciprocation. We're all walking libraries of relationship lessons, carrying forward the accumulated wisdom of everyone we've ever loved. Each relationship is both a love story and an education, sometimes a graduate degree in patience, sometimes a crash course in boundaries, sometimes a masterclass in forgiveness. The person you're with next won't just be falling in love with who you naturally are. They'll be falling in love with who you've been shaped to become by everyone who came before them. Your capacity for kindness has been deepened by partners who needed kindness. Your ability to communicate has been honed by partners who needed translation. Your emotional intelligence has been developed by partners who challenged you to grow. The gratitude. We don't know. We owe. There's a Buddhist teaching about how we're all interconnected, how the boundaries between self and other are more fluid than we imagine. When I think about the invisible ways we shape each other through love, this teaching takes on new meaning. The person you'll love next has been prepared for you by everyone they've loved before. Their capacity for the kind of love you need has been developed through relationships that ended, through heartbreaks that taught them resilience, through partners who showed them what they really valued and what they couldn't accept. Their ability to apologize sincerely, learned from someone who needed apologies but couldn't accept shallow ones. Their emotional availability, developed through loving someone who needed more presence than they initially knew how to give. Their respect for boundaries, taught by someone who showed them what happens when boundaries are crossed. We owe gratitude to people whose names we'll never know, whose faces we'll never see, whose hearts shaped our beloved's heart before we ever arrived. And somewhere out there, people we'll never meet will benefit from the ways we've loved imperfectly, the ways we've challenged and grown, and been challenged by the partners we've held and lost. The eternal return. This realization can feel bitter at first. It's natural to feel cheated, to think, why couldn't they learn these lessons with me? Why couldn't we both grow together and keep what we built? But maybe the bitterness dissolves when we realize that growth doesn't end with any one relationship. We're all continuously becoming, continuously learning, continuously being shaped by love in all its forms. The person you are with your next love will be different from who you were with your last love. Not just because time has passed, but because love changes us at a cellular level. Every relationship rewrites parts of our emotional DNA. Every ending teaches us something about beginning again. And here's the beautiful secret. While you're mourning the person your ex became after you left, you're becoming someone new too. You're integrating lessons they taught you, developing capacities they helped you discover, growing in ways that were only possible because you loved them and lost them. The next person who loves you won't just be getting the natural you. They'll be getting the version of you that was refined by every heart that came before theirs. They'll benefit from your increased emotional intelligence, your expanded capacity for patience, your hard-won wisdom about what love really requires. The sacred work of loving. What if we could see our relationships not as successes or failures, but as sacred collaborations in the work of human becoming? What if instead of measuring love by its duration, we measured it by its transformative power? What if the highest compliment we could pay a past love wasn't, "We should have stayed together," but "I became more myself because I loved you"? This doesn't make the endings hurt less. It doesn't erase the loneliness of wondering if we'll ever find someone who gets us the way our ex eventually got their new partner. It doesn't eliminate the very human desire to be the one who gets to enjoy the fruits of our own emotional labor. But it does offer a different way of holding our relationship history. Not as a series of failures leading up to the one, but as a continuous education in the art of loving and being loved. Every person we've loved deeply has been both student and teacher in this academy. Every relationship that's ended has been both an ending and a beginning. The end of one kind of love, the beginning of a new version of ourselves. The invisible legacy. Sarah doesn't know that David learned emotional presence from her 3 years of refusing to let him hide. David doesn't know that Sarah learned to value her own worth from his inability to see it clearly at the time. Marcus doesn't know that his ex-girlfriend's indecision taught him patience. His ex doesn't know that his decisiveness taught her that sometimes you have to choose a path and trust yourself to navigate it. We're all walking around carrying invisible gifts from people who broke our hearts, using skills we learned in relationships that ended to love new people better. We're all unknowing beneficiaries of the emotional labor that previous lovers invested in the people we now hold dear. This is the hidden economy of human connection. We are constantly trading in lessons and growth and expanded capacity for love, often without realizing we're part of this grand exchange. Your heartbreak is not wasted. Your difficult love was not meaningless. The person you couldn't make it work with is out there using what you taught them to love someone else more skillfully. And you're doing the same with what they taught you. The long view of love. Maybe this is what wisdom looks like. Understanding that love is bigger than any single relationship. That we're all participants in something larger than our individual romantic stories. Maybe maturity is learning to feel genuinely happy when we hear that an ex has found peace with someone else, knowing that our difficult love played a role in preparing them for that peace. Maybe healing is recognizing that we've been prepared for our next great love by all the loves that came before, including the ones that ended badly, including the ones that felt like failures at the time. In the grand tapestry of human connection, we're all threads weaving in and out of each other's patterns. We touch other lives, leave invisible marks, carry forward what others have given us, pass along what we've learned. No love is ever really lost. It transforms, it moves forward, it becomes part of how we love next. The person you loved who seemed incapable of change, they changed. Just not with you, and not on your timeline. The lessons you tried so hard to teach fell on soil that needed time to receive them. The seeds you planted are blooming in gardens you'll never see. And the same is true for you. You're blooming with lessons learned from loves that ended. You're carrying forward gifts from relationships that felt like mistakes at the time. You're more capable of love now than you were before your heart was broken. More skilled at intimacy than you were before you learned what doesn't work. This is the alchemy of heartbreak. It transforms us all into better lovers, even when we can't see it happening, even when the benefits go to people who weren't there for the painful parts of our education. Your difficult love mattered. Your ended relationship had meaning. Your heartbreak was not in vain. Somewhere, someone is loving better because you loved imperfectly first. And you're loving better because of everyone who loved you imperfectly before. In this way, we're all connected in an endless chain of hearts, teaching hearts how to love more truly. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's everything. The next time you hear about an ex finding happiness with someone new, remember, you were part of that story. Your love, difficult as it may have been, was part of the education that prepared them for that happiness. And somewhere in your own future, someone is waiting to benefit from everything your heart has learned, from all the ways you've been transformed by love, including the love that ended. This is the cruel truth, and the beautiful truth both. We help create the people we cannot keep, and we are created by the people we could not hold on to. In the end, maybe that's what love really is. Not the keeping, but the transforming. Not the staying, but the becoming. The most profound loves often teach us the most after they're gone. In losing them, we find parts of ourselves we never knew existed. In their absence, we discover capacities we didn't know we had. This is the gift disguised as loss, the education disguised as heartbreak, the beginning disguised as an ending. Love changes us all, and that change ripples outward, touching lives we'll never know. Improving loves we'll never witness, creating happiness we'll never see, but somehow helped make possible. This is the invisible legacy of every heart that has dared to love deeply, struggled honestly, and grown through the beautiful difficulty of human connection. Your love mattered. Your heart matters. The person you're becoming because of love, all love, even lost love, is a gift to everyone you'll ever care about from now on. That's the alchemy of heartbreak. That's the sacred work of love. That's how we help each other become more than we ever imagined we could be.